All right, we are back here on the podcast. The brackets dropped just over a little over 2 hours ago. We started getting the information here. The full field of 68 here. Back again for our annual March Madness edition. We're going to cover the tournament in depth, including a selection Sunday breakdown. Troy Mauriello is back with us. Troy, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mike. Thank you for having me. It's become a tradition of us to do this on Selection Sunday and all the way through to the Final Four and the national title. So looking forward to another year.
Absolutely here. And I got to say for sure, like, this was a very curious year for me. I was watching this like week play out, champ week. The bubble implode, which we'll get to in a minute. And we have a lot of like basically chalk holes aside from a couple of leagues in that are very
hmm
impactful here. Like, I must say, I'm pleasantly surprised. I think we got the right 68 teams in for once. That's not always the thing.
Yeah. I think that you can't really complain too much either way. I think about how the bubble shook out. A lot of these seeds. No one really, I think, was terribly, shockingly underseeded or overseeded. And like you mentioned, I think a lot of these bubble teams kind of playing their way off the bubble certainly helped that. We'll get to Miami of Ohio, I'm sure, in a second, but I think that they almost made it kind of easy for the committee to compromise and put them in the first four. So yeah, I don't think there's really any big complaints with this one.
Yeah, no complaints. This is not like us last year coming and screaming on North Carolina or 2 years ago about
Yeah.
Virginia. Like,
hmm
like I think like unless you're like an alum of Auburn or Oklahoma or San Diego State to a degree, I don't think you're screaming too much at the committee.
No, exactly. Like, yeah, unless you're a biased, member of one of those schools, like you mentioned. Yeah, there's nothing really. I don't think that you can complain about.
Before we dive in some of their choice here, do we want to just discuss the bubble real quick? Because like I think like this year has shown us that the idea we need to get to past 68 teams to 76, which is or 80, which has been heard about. This bubble was atrocious. I think we ended the week with about like you say what 20 teams in the bubble. You say going in the week, and we've had like 15 of them lose the first round of their conference tournaments, their first second game. Like nobody was really trying to help themselves this week.
Yeah, exactly. I think that this week was a perfect example of, like you mentioned, why we don't need to extend or expand the NCAA tournament whatsoever. I mean, we've done this multiple times now. It's the most perfect sporting event, I think, in all of sports, at what it is right now with the 68 and having the first four playing, before the round of 64. I think it's perfect. And like you said, we saw so many bubble teams this year. It was the weakest bubble ever, kind of coincidentally there that we had metrically the or analytically the weakest bubble that we've ever seen in a year where NCAA tournament expansion is such a hot topic. But I think that again, a lot of those bubble teams made it kind of easy for the selection committee to exclude them. But in future years, we're going to have some of these teams if we do expand, which it looks like eventually we're going to get to that point. We're going to have some of these teams who are like dying to not be in the NCAA tournament, playing in these first round, playing whatever games you want to call them. So yeah, it just looks like that's where we're headed right now. But yeah, definitely an argument against that for sure this year.
Yeah, and I will go to the video version here. Mike Phillips on YouTube here. I think one thing that people need to realize here is that like this really became more of an issue once we abandoned the RPI. And the RPI was a thing that for years we heard a lot of complaints from the Power Five school like
Mhm.
leagues about, oh, the mid majors can game the RPI. Like they artificially inflate their RPIs. Don't play anybody.
Mhm.
And then you have the net now, which basically, and the reason why I'm happy Auburn did not make it was this idea that,
Mhm.
like now you just get rewarded for showing up to play league games, don't necessarily have to win them. So just
Mhm.
I have a fun side by side for you. I found the RPI, which people don't know it's still being calculated. It's not being
I
used.
did not know that.
Yeah, it is. So Warren Nolan's website has the RPI like entered today. So I'm gonna put up for you on the YouTube version here so you can take a look at this. So the RPI, some of the teams in the top 20 here. We can see a lot of the big names and then some notable ones here. Gonzaga, number 11. Utah State, number 13, which drew a 9 seed this year. St.
Yep.
Mary's, a 7 seed, got a 15, is a 15 in the RPI.
Mm.
And the 21 to 40 range. 23 to 25, VCU, Santa Clara, St. Louis, VCU, which we learned will not have made the tournament, didn't win the A10's auto bid. South Florida, Akron, 30 31, Miami, Ohio, 32. Well, further down here, you notice who we're missing here.
Yeah, I mean, well, we're seeing a lot more mid majors than anything else.
A lot of our bubble teams are not down here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You remember back in the day that like when you had an RPI over like 50, it was considered bad and like
Hmm.
non-go for the tournament. Here's
Yep.
some of the bubbles like numbers here for some of these bubble teams here, the RPIs. NC State 46,
Yep.
SMU 49,
Hmm.
Auburn at 50, Georgia 51. They were an 8 seed. TCU at 54, they were a 9 seed. Iowa, which is pretty high, they got a 56 in there.
Mm.
Keep going here. Stanford's at 60, and we can keep going. Texas A&M in the
Feel
field at
like it.
71 RPI.
Texas A&M. Yeah. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the best one yet, we haven't gotten there yet. Texas, 91 RPI in the field.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean that's the perfect example of what has happened now with the net that, like you said, a lot of these power conferences can kind of game the net. I remember that was a big thing with the Big 12 a couple of years ago, where the Big 12, it felt like they were playing all these, softer non-conference games and blowing teams out was helping their net ranking. And now, I mean, yeah, like we've seen, the net is certainly favors these power conference teams, as opposed to what we used to do.
Yeah, here's what we have on the net side. I have that up on the next tab here, so I get to look here. Some of our notable nets here in the top 30 that did not make the field here. We had obviously our bubble teams. We had NC State 36, SMU 37, Auburn 38 does not make the field, 17 and 16. At
Mm-hmm.
4 and 13, at 7 and 15 is the top two quadrants, does a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
TCU 39, Santa Clara 40, Indiana 41 misses.
Indiana.
Yeah, Texas makes the field, VCU makes the field, and then we're going down a bit for teams, like your
Mm-hmm.
Akrons, like
Yeah.
McNeese. They were higher in
Mm-hmm.
the RPI. Miami, Ohio 64 after they got hit with that quad four loss in the tournament. So
Mm-hmm.
tell you, like net is designed to help the big boys.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I believe I saw somewhere that this is the most teams that we've seen from the top four conferences, though excluding the Big East, the Power Four conferences. This is the most teams that we've ever had in the field of 68 from the Power Four conferences. So, that just speaks to it. This is becoming college basketball as a whole is really becoming the haves and the have-nots, and that's becoming, are you in one of these conferences that, is going to be rewarded with the net? Are you in one of these conferences that, has money to spend and has a seat at the table, or are you not? That's just the way that it's going, and it's sad because obviously, this month is so much about the upset and the David versus the Goliath situation. And it seems like we're getting further and further away from that in these mega conferences now, 18 team conferences like the Big Ten, like the ACC. But yeah, having the most amount of teams in the field that were from Power Four conferences, and then also looking at that, it kind of explains why.
Yeah, and this is also a year where you had a bid thief in the MAC. You had a bid thief in the A10, as it turns out. You had three
Mm-hmm.
teams out of the West Coast Conference. You
Yeah.
only got one out of the Mountain West, and they had one of the first four out. And the Mountain West is going to be a lot different next year, and half of their membership goes to Pac-12, Gonzaga, Washington State,
Mm-hmm.
Oregon. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
Oregon State. So, like, this is one of those years where you're, like, looking at it, like, even a year where it feels like it's good for mid-majors, you still lost.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. You got a lot more bids than really you would have gotten had there not been bid stealers.
Yeah, so I think let's talk about a couple of things here on the Miami of Ohio front. Obviously, they have the big loss on Friday to UMass in the Sweet Six in the MAC
The
quarterfinals.
Borgers. Yeah.
Yeah, quad four loss. There's a lot of talk about like schedules weak, so on and so forth. Do they don't deserve to be in? I think they made the right call bringing them in. Obviously, we'll hear first from committee chair Keith Gill, who I think, by the way, great job by Keith Gill doing his job, because I feel like he is a lot more elaborate and explained very well the choices the committee made. Like last year, we had Bubba Cunningham flouting around trying to explain why his UNC got the benefit of the doubt. It's like 1-12 quad one record
Mm-hmm.
already. More
Mm-hmm.
common West Virginia team. I got a clip from a selection show I'm going to play here, and this is what Keith Gill had to say about Miami, Ohio getting in the tournament. Then we can react to that. One second here. I think I hit the wrong thing, so
Mm-hmm.
I forgot to share the audio. So go ahead and try again. Let's go back to Keith Gill.
Ohio and VCU. So Miami, Ohio as the 44th overall seed. That's the lowest of all the at-larges, but I know that doesn't necessarily mean they were the last team selected. If you could let us in on that conversation, then also VCU being behind leads me to infer that if VCU doesn't win today, they would not have been in the tournament. Could you just address those two teams, please?
Yeah, that's the great question, Seth. Miami, Ohio was not the last team selected into the field. So they came in before NC State, Texas, and SMU. And when we did our scrubbing process, those teams scrubbed above them relative to the predictive metrics and also the difference in the quality of the wins. So they scrubbed up above them. And then with regards to VCU, they would not have been in the field if they had not won the Atlantic 10 automatic qualifier.
All right, so he goes on to elaborate later on that SMU was basically the last team picked in the field. VCU would not have made here, but I think important to note here that Miami, Ohio was picked ahead of the other three first four teams, which their resume dictated. They weren't an undefeated team. They should have been in there, and probably if St. Louis wins the A10, like they're probably not in Dayton to begin with. But I think like they deserve credit here for getting in. You can quibble whether or not they should be in the first four, where they've earned a spot in the main draw. But if you kept Miami, Ohio out, you're basically telling 75% of D1 that your regular season doesn't matter. All that matters is whether you can show up for a weekend and your conference tournament and win it.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said at the top, I think that almost made it so much easier for the committee outside of them winning their conference tournament. That made it very easy for them to put them in Dayton, and I don't think anyone can really complain about that. I mean, listen, I could see the arguments on both sides of the aisle. Like you said, a team that goes undefeated in the regular season, it doesn't matter what conference you're playing in. That's an impressive feat, and you deserve to at least be considered. Even playing such a weak non-conference schedule, that's the other side of the coin. Of course, they played such a weak non-conference schedule. Didn't even play a quad one game. And we're winning a lot of games kind of unconvincingly, I think you would say. So there's certainly arguments on both sides of the coin. The fact that they lose their first MAC tournament game, the fact that they lose a quad four game, kind of made it easy, I think, for the committee to just say, let's put them in Dayton and make everyone happy. Like you mentioned, if they would not have been in the field, that would have just shown you that again, like you said, playing the regular season really wouldn't matter, and it would also cause a lot more of these conferences to go to these more wacky setups with their conference tournaments where they're really trying to tailor it so that their best teams get into the field. We're already seeing more and more of that now as we go on. And yeah, so I think that this was a really good compromise for the committee to get them in Dayton. They deserve to be in for sure, even with the one loss. And now they get a chance to prove it. They play a team in SMU, last team in the field. And I believe they win that, they get Tennessee. So like they have now two high major opponents that they're going to be playing. I'm sure it'll be a close game with them and SMU. So they have a chance now to prove that they deserve to be there and that they deserve to be in the main draw.
Yep. Certainly worth observing that for sure. I do think also in terms of my Ohio situation with the schedule, yes, could they made more of an effort to go to, a team from the A10, the Mountain West? Sure. But like I know Travis Steele's got a record on this detail that they spent a lot of time reaching out to teams in the offseason to play them. And this is a team that last year was in the MAC title game, lost to Akron, retained, I think, 6 of their top 9 scorers. And this is a spot where a lot of these teams were trying to game the net. And basically, the way the power conference is gaming that, it's like in non-con, we either play each other or we play a million quad fours. We can win by 70 points and inflate our net. And Miami, Ohio has not fit either of those buckets of these teams. I believe I saw a report where Illinois basically replied to them and said, hey, like, we have to play 300 plus like teams schedule before we even consider you, which tells you again, you can't blame Miami, Ohio for that. That's a scheduling NCAA problem. That's like, I think we need to figure out a way to address a little bit.
For sure. Yeah, that's an issue that the NCAA needs to figure out, and it all comes back to the net, like we mentioned before. Yeah, that's something that the NCAA needs to figure out because, yeah, the fact that Miami of Ohio was not able to play these high profile games in the non-conference, it ends up creating this huge controversy now because they go undefeated, but they just weren't able to find anyone to play them at the start of the non-conference. So yeah, that's an NCAA issue that needs to get fixed among many other things.
Yeah, would you like to also hear about the Auburn situation? And this was probably the other controversial entry into the tournament here, because obviously you heard the Bruce Pearl controversy a few weeks back with Auburn saying, oh, if Iowa has one of the 30, not one of the best at-large teams, he kind of walks it back. says they deserve to be in based on achievement. And then we have the Auburn situation where they're putting out infographics on social media saying, "Oh, look who we played, look how great we played, like look how many great games we played. We won at Florida, all this great stuff." Like it's just not on the CBS show, but it was on the CBS Sports Network's bracket breakdown. They have an interview with Keith Gill there, so we're gonna go to that right now, and we're gonna listen to what he had to say when he's asked about why Auburn did not make the field.
Had a really strong season in terms of its better wins, but had 16 losses. There's never been a team that had that many losses, one game over 500. Did the loss volume matter when it came to them not getting in? I know Oklahoma was the first team out of the field. This is my last question about the bubble specifically, Keith. But it seems that the projections for this bracket and committee behavior wound up actually bearing true. Just curious on how legitimately close those teams were or were not when it came down to it.
Yeah, I thought they were very close. You know, those first four, the first four out was very close. You know, you mentioned Auburn. Obviously, they had a really strong strength of schedule. They had some really good wins. That win at Florida is a great win. But when you look at that winning percentage, 515, you know, the 16 losses, you know, when the committee took that all into consideration, they thought they just hadn't done enough to make it inside the field.
Auburn.
Yeah, so I'll go to that point here in terms of what the committee chair is saying here with Auburn. 17 and 16, barely above 500. No at-large he's ever been picked one game above 500. No at-large he's ever been picked with 16 losses. They played a lot of great games. They did not win enough of the great games. And I've been arguing on people on Twitter who say, "Oh, you know, we played so hard. Should we in?" My point is, you know what? If you don't lose all three to at Mississippi State, at Oklahoma, and home to Ole Miss at the bottom of your league, you win two of those and are 19 and 14, you're probably in the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we can't just give teams credit just for playing a really tough schedule. And Auburn obviously played an incredibly tough non-conference schedule, and then it played in the SEC, so had a bunch of opportunities for the quad one as well. But yeah, when you have a team that's barely over 500, like to me, that should be a no-brainer that you're not in. And the fact that there was such a debate about them as the losses just piled up, especially towards the end of the year, that they weren't. It's not like they were, a couple games under and went on this run towards the end of the year. It was kind of the opposite, really, with them. So I don't think that it was really even much of a debate. It surprised me how much of a debate it was. You don't get credit just for playing tough games. You got to win some of them, and they did beat Florida on the road. Credit to them for that. But outside of that, there weren't really a ton of high level wins for them. They beat my team, St. John's, back in November. But outside of that, like, they didn't have these crazy wins. And like you mentioned, they had a couple of really tough losses that almost negate that win over Florida. So we can't be crediting teams just for playing a tough schedule. And when we have a team that's barely over 500, maybe 2 or 3 years ago and from now, when we expand the NCAA tournament, they'll be in and they can play a first four game or first round game, whatever you want to call it. But right now, when we're at 68 and we're still only having 4 teams playing Dayton, I think I'm perfectly fine with them being left out, and I didn't even think it was really much of a debate.
Yeah, I think it's just college football brain creeping in here with that Auburn debate, where a lot of the college football be like, "Oh, who'd you play? Like we played so hard." I looked at some of these schedules here, like you lose by 30 in Michigan, you lose by like 29 to Purdue, 28 to Arizona. You don't get credit for me for those games, and the net problem here is like there are results in the net. You look at these and like. For example, Indiana losing, I think Ohio State earlier gained a quad one win over Northwestern because Northwestern was moving to the top 75 and the game was on the road. And I think that Northwestern finished below 500 here. That's the system we're creating here where a win at Northwestern is more valuable than beating the only unbeaten team in the country.
Yeah, exactly. And the net, we've talked about it before with how skewed it can be. You had my team, St. John's, beating a team like Butler on the road, and that was a quad one win for a while, or a team like Creighton on the road. These teams are under 500 in the league or in their overall schedule, and they were a quad one road win. So yeah, it's a flawed system, as we discussed before. But I don't think whatever you want to look at, I don't think Auburn had much of a case.
Yeah, let's get into the teams that actually made the tournament here. I think like overall, I'll say in this committee grade, when in the past you've gone. You obviously gave, I think, the FF minus 2 years ago with the Virginia year. I think it was not much better last year. I think the committee this year, I think they get a solid B plus from me.
For sure. Yeah. They definitely, we'll get to in a second, but I thought that they gave the number one overall seed a really tough bracket and tough region. But outside of that, I mean, I don't, like I said at the top, I don't think that any team was really criminally overseeded or underseeded. So, there's little minor things here and there, but I thought that this was one of the better jobs that this committee has done.
Yeah, I think what my issues is more in the like, okay, maybe, somebody's a line higher, maybe we're not consistent on some things. Like
Hmm.
some teams are getting home court advantage in the early rounds they shouldn't. Like that's more my gripe as opposed to last year. Like, how is this team not in the field? Or like
Hmm.
2 years ago, like how is 28-6 St. Louis not in the field? And we're putting in mediocre Virginia.
Yeah, exactly. Or, yeah. We hadn't have a team that was like, hold on, they were a consensus 3 seed and we had them 8, or the committee had them 8. Stuff like that. There was really nothing like that this year.
Yeah, Keith. I hope the committee learns from the Keith Gill experience, and they are more, and for the most part, what they talked about in the Cedarville, they really stuck to. There's no like dramatic changes.
No, exactly. Yeah, it was pretty much, to what they had a couple more that was a month ago.
All right, which region you want to start with?
Let's start in the East.
All right, the East region, the top overall seed here is Duke. I'll let you get to St. John's in a minute because St. John's is in this region here. So we'll share the screen here. This is from On3 social media post. So I'm going to put it on the big screen for us to look at here. So the number one seed, Duke, they get the local MAC champ Siena as the 16. They are I think they should stomp through because Siena is basically playing with a six-man rotation right after Antonio Chandler was ruled ineligible. Ohio State TCU, I think my favorite 8-9 game of the tournament. St. John's, the 5 seed, goes out west to San Diego by winning both the Big East and regular season and tournament crowns. They get the tougher 12 seed draws Northern Iowa. Kansas against first time tournament team Cal Baptist, 4-13. 6-11 matchup Louisville and South Florida is a sneaky good game. Michigan State, North Dakota State. UCLA surging. We had some key injuries against UCF. And UConn and Furman in Philly. So, my initial takeaway from the East region here, Duke got hosed with this draw
Hmm.
because the the East region, we saw it on the S curve. They had by far
Yeah.
the toughest like stack of teams in the top 4 seeds. And you go
Hmm.
down the list. St. John's like a double champion at Power League. Louisville with a star freshman in their league. UCLA surging down the stretch. Obviously, Sparty, we talked about. UConn, very good team. The toughest 8-9 in Ohio State TCU, while Duke is still getting pieces back. What did the Blue
Hmm.
Devils do to get this draw for a top football seed?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, just look at, of course, these are all strong teams, but look at the brands in this region. You have Duke, you have St. John's, you have Kansas, Louisville, Michigan State, UCLA, UConn. Like there are just some mega brands in this region. But yeah, like you said, they get a tough 8-9 game, and then they're going to either play or you would assume St. John's, who is a double champ in a power conference, or Kansas with one of the best freshmen in the nation. And then if they're able to get through that, who knows if Michigan State might be waiting for them, UConn in the Elite Eight. Like it is just a really tough draw for Duke. It felt like this one was kind of made for the TV ratings almost this region because like you could have a second round matchup between St. John's and Kansas. You could have a second round matchup between UCLA and UConn, Michigan State and UConn, Duke and Kansas, Duke and St. John's. Like the TV ratings for this region are going to be awesome, but is it that fair for the number one overall seed? They do get to play in the East, so they get to play in Philly and they get to play in Washington, D.C. So they'll have a crazy home court advantage the entire way, but definitely not an easy run. If they make it to the Final Four, they're going to earn it.
They will absolutely earn here. If you can make any sorts of bets on like TV broadcasting, you could like just put, it'll be like minus 100,000 that the Iron Eagle crew will be in DC for the second week of the tournament.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you're gonna. I mean, just think of the brands that could possibly be in Washington D.C. Think about the brands that are going to be in Washington D.C. Like with Duke. You could have St. John's or Kansas. You could have UConn in there. You could have Michigan State. Like there's so much to love with that region, and it's going to be awesome. But tough draw for Duke.
Yeah, tough draw for Duke here. I will also throw in here. I think their first round side's Greenville, so they're going to South Carolina first, and then they're
Mhm.
going to and then they go into Washington, so they aren't going to travel very far, which is helpful for them.
Mm.
That's really the only advantage they have here. That 8-9 game, I think is my favorite game of the first round, the Ohio State TCU game, because TCU has some really great wins. They beat Florida in the non-conference. They beat Wisconsin on
Mm.
non-conference. They beat Iowa State earlier this year. And you have
Mhm.
Ohio State, which, I mean, they don't have a great record. They have some good wins down the stretch here. Their
Mhm.
all-time leading scorer, Bruce Thornton's a bucket getter. And, like,
Mhm.
the injury in the backcourt to Caleb Foss here, that's a really tough 8-9 draw, whoever comes out of that for Duke.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned Bruce Thornton at Ohio State. I mean, guard play wins in March, right? And when you have a guard like that who can just score it at will, if he's on, that could be a tough matchup for Duke. I'm also looking at South Florida and Louisville. Like that'll be an interesting game as well. Louisville, I thought really underperformed this year from what they were thought to be at the start of the year. Could be a really, really interesting game for South Florida, the surging South Florida against Louisville.
Yeah, and obviously Michael Brown, an issue for the Louisville with the injuries. I don't know how healthy he's going to be.
Mhm.
Committee definitely, I know they say they don't because they always have some interesting things in mind. The second year in a row, they tried to give us the Kansas St. John second round matchup. And because they didn't get it last year, now they're going to do it again. I want to give you the floor on St. John's here because I think, obviously, I think they got boned in terms of, they win the Big East regular season, they win the Big East conference tournament, not boned in terms of seeding. I think they're right where they should be. Maybe a four if you want to argue they should be at Arkansas. They won both, and Arkansas only won one. That's the seeding issue. But they go all 3,000 miles across the country to play in San Diego against one of the more dangerous 12 seeds in Northern Iowa, who we saw put on a clinic in the Missouri Valley tournament and was only seeded so low because they were hurt half the year. The fact that's your draw and a team a line below you, North Carolina, basically has home games the first two rounds. Like, if you're a St. John's fan, you're pissed.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're somehow able to get through Northern Iowa and then Kansas, like you're looking at Duke in the Sweet 16, the number one overall seed. I think St. John's was like 18th, I believe, on the seed list, like just too low. And again, for a team that won its regular season outright, they have two wins over UConn. Their last game over UConn, they beat them by 20. Like they completely avenged that embarrassing loss that they had a few weeks ago to UConn. I thought they were a four. I think that this just kind of even more goes to show you that these conference tournaments really don't matter. That the committee, I think it was after what do they say after Friday, they really don't take any of these results into consideration. So
I'll push back on that in a few minutes.
yeah, it just seems like the St. John's I thought had a chance at a four seed. Very surprised that they were not. But the difference between a four and a five is not all that much in terms of your first round and your second round game. But yeah, definitely disappointed in the route that St. John's has, not only to the second weekend, but if they want to go beyond. It's just when you look at that, it's like, man, let's just try to get to the second weekend, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah, and second week, you have a lot of air miles on you, too, because you're going out to San Diego, then back to New York before you go to Washington. So you're flying across the
Hmm.
country twice.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Whereas that's not a thing here. Anything else you want to say on this group before we move on to the next one?
No, I think we can move on.
All right. So where do you want to go next?
Let's go. Let's go to the south.
All right. So let's pull that one up here. Let's go to the South region once I figure out where I have it on my tab. So I have all of them loaded up. So let's go South region. I think I pulled the Midwest up twice by accident, so I'll load the South up now. So, which is where our number 4 seed overall, the Florida Gators are playing. So we'll go ahead and pop that up here. So this region is in Houston. So that's of note to remember this for later. So South region here. One overall seed Florida, which it gets smoked in the semifinals of the SEC tournament by Missouri, by Vanderbilt, but they don't pay for it because UConn and Houston both can't win their conference tournaments. They get a first 4 winner. Clemson, Iowa, the 8-9 game, not my favorite. Vanderbilt, McNeese, interesting. The Cowboys with the defensive pressure. I think it's an interesting upset spot here because you have a Vanderbilt team that played on Sunday in the SEC final now has to have a little less rest to get ready for that style. Nebraska trying to win its first ever tournament game against Troy, which is a capable team. North Carolina, VCU, we'll talk about that in a second. I have an issue with the Carolina situation. Illinois, Penn, St. Mary's, who I love, Texas A&M, Houston, Idaho. Where do you want to start here?
Yeah, I mean, I like a lot of the first round matchups and potential second round matchups in this region. You look at a possible second round matchup if they can get there between Vanderbilt and Nebraska, two teams that kind of came out of nowhere. Both were on these long unbeaten streaks to start the year. Nebraska obviously looking for its first ever NCAA tournament win. They go up against a team in Troy that I believe, beat San Diego State on the road and nearly beat USC on the road. Like a team that clearly can hang with these high major teams. Vanderbilt gets McNeese, which pulled an upset in the first round last year over Clemson. So like they both have tough first round matchups. Then if they can get past them, that's a really fun second round matchup for those two. Two teams that kind of had these similar types of seasons. You have Illinois and Penn. I'm kind of interested in that. That's Fran McCaffrey going up against Illinois, which is kind of interesting. St. Mary's and Texas A&M, two completely clashing styles. St. Mary's wants to just completely take the air out of the ball and play defense. Texas A&M wants to run and get as many shots up as possible. And then you look at Houston. They are the 2 seed, but they can potentially get basically home games in the second weekend against Florida. Florida looked unbeatable for quite some time, and then they trip up in the SEC tournament. But they could possibly see Vanderbilt again in the second weekend. So lots of very interesting matchups in this region for me.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Houston angle here. It's just interesting though here. This region is being played at Toyota Center, which is about 20 minutes from Houston's campus.
Yeah.
It was initially supposed to host this in
Yeah.
the Constitution, which means you're not allowed to do this. In September, the host committee switched it and got Rice to volunteer to host. And Rice basically knows they're not going to the tournament. So they did Houston a favor, give Houston this opportunity to play here.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you're looking at Houston potential essentially home games against Illinois or North Carolina or, in the Elite Eight against Florida. Like that changes things completely for them. Being the 2 seed, they'd probably take that being the 2 as opposed to being the 1 somewhere else. So definitely works out for them. I actually like them to get out of this region, to be honest with you, because of that, just because they're going to have such a home court advantage. But how fun would that be in the Elite Eight, getting a Houston Florida rematch, for the right to go to the Final Four?
Yeah, certainly a fun storyline the committee definitely probably had in mind when they made this draw here. I will say, in terms of just like teams that really have a gripe with their situations, I think Illinois is up there because they have a better regular season than Purdue. They get lapped by Purdue because Purdue had a good week in Indianapolis this week, and they fall with 3 seed where they have to go to Greenville, South Carolina, staring at potentially a road game against North Carolina in this round of 32. Then they have a road game again against Houston if they get to this week to there. It's like the 3 seed is playing back-to-back road games to me is garbage. And like what did North Carolina do to like merit a basically home court advantage in the first 2 rounds as a lower seed?
Yeah, exactly. And you and I both flagged that immediately when we saw that. You almost wonder maybe if it's like kind of making up for the Caleb Wilson injury, kind of being like, this team would have been a higher seed had they had him, but he's not around. I don't know, but yeah, it doesn't really make much sense. And like you said, making the 3 seed in that region, a team that's been around the top 10 all year long, that has a very good resume, and some really awesome wins, making them play back-to-back road games just to get to the Elite Eight, not even get to the Final Four. Very, very tough for Illinois.
Yeah, and you said there haven't been many that were you would consider overseeds. Like according to Ken Palm, North Carolina is a 2 seat, 2 lines higher than they should be right now.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, you look at the way that they've been playing recently, they're a very soft 6 seed. I think they can get picked off by VCU in that first round. That's going to be one that I think a lot of people pick. A nice first round upset VCU over North Carolina, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see here. And one thing I will say here in terms of this region, but they potential bracket buster in here, I think watch St. Mary's because
Hmm.
what's our main criticism about St. Mary's in the past when it comes to these games? They can't score.
Hmm.
They're averaging over 5 points a game more this season than last season, and they're shooting about 6% better from 3, which are recipes you need to win this tournament.
Yeah, for sure. And how about a potential St. Mary's Houston second round game? Like you said, both offenses have gotten much and much better, or better and better as the years have gone on. Both of those teams, and those defenses are still 2 elite level defenses. So that could be an awesome second round matchup.
Yeah, I like part of me. I need to do a little more homework on this. I would like part of me wants to pick St. Mary's here to get through. I feel like
Yeah,
they have a shot to pick Houston because the Houston defense is not as strong as it's been in recent years.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then that's going to be, if they can get through that, obviously they've got a real shot.
Anything else you want to talk about in here before we move on to another region?
No, let's move on.
All right, so next region on the board here. You want the West or you want the Midwest?
Let's do the Midwest.
All right, so let me find the Midwest here. All right, so Midwest region. This is from Yahoo's social media account here. Our number one seed here is Michigan. They fell a seed line after they lost the Big Ten tournament final. They play the UMBC Howard first four winner. Georgia St. Louis, the 8-9 game in Buffalo. And an interesting note here that St. Louis, I think a Kansas City pot available. St. Louis got sent out as the 9 seed. Missouri got to go as a 10 seed. That's a little power conference bias in there. That's just me.
For
Texas,
sure.
Texas Tech Akron is the 5-12. Texas Tech stumbling a little without JT Toppin. Alabama Hofstra, first on the prior in the tournament since Jay Wright coached the team in 2001. They would have gone in 2020 if COVID didn't happen. Tennessee against the Miami Ohio SMU winner. Virginia and Wright State. That's a 3-14 matchup. Kentucky against Santa Clara, a very fun 7-10 game. Iowa State, Tennessee State making their first tournament appearance since 1990 for Tennessee State. So what do you think about this region?
Yeah, for sure. I think I look at that Georgia St. Louis first round game going to be awesome. The 8-9 games are always tight. I think those two teams are very, very similar. That'll be a really, really interesting game. You look at the 5-12 and the 4-13, I think that's where we're going to see a lot of upsets. Akron over Texas Tech. I could see a lot of people picking that. Texas Tech banged up, obviously, with the JT Toppin injury. Akron's a team that's been around in the NCAA tournament that, was favored to win the MAC tournament over Miami of Ohio. So that's an Akron team that's, was picked highly to start the year as well. I could kind of see a lot of people picking Hofstra over Alabama too. Hofstra's got an awesome guard, Cruz Davis, who can really score it. Alabama, obviously, if they're hitting their shots, they can beat anyone, but they are inconsistent. We saw them with a tough loss in the SEC tournament, so they can take a bad loss here and there. So those are kind of two matchups that I could see a lot of people picking upsets. I don't love Virginia this season. I'm not in love with them. Kentucky, Santa Clara, very, very interesting 7-10 matchup. But I think Michigan gets through this region. I don't want to say easily, but I think Michigan is pretty clearly the best team in this region. I don't love Iowa State, so I think Michigan gets through this region pretty easily.
I like the path Michigan has here. I think that
Yeah,
did pretty well for themselves, even though they lost a couple of spots in the overall S curve. I think that they're set up pretty well here. St. Louis could be tricky, but they've been not playing their best form of late. There are
yeah,
potential upsets in here. Miami, Ohio, if they get by the SMU game, they had a chance to get Tennessee because Nate Ammon's been hobbled a little bit down the stretch.
yeah,
Something that could really impact them here. Kentucky, Santa Clara is very fun because Santa Clara is an underrated team, like out of the West Coast Conference. They beat St. Mary's twice. They play Gonzaga very tight all 3 times here. They have the kind of length and physicality that will give a Tennessee team that's not like that, like special problems.
yeah, for sure, for sure. And also, I mean, just looking at the 1 seed, like I wonder, ask Duke if they would rather have this path, Michigan's path to the 1 seed or to the Final Four, or their own. Like, I think Michigan's got a much easier path. Duke's going to travel regardless. I believe those second round games are in Chicago, so like Duke's going to travel regardless. So I look at those two paths and I compare them, and it seems like Michigan got the far easier path to the Final Four.
Yeah, the geography worked against Duke here.
For sure.
All right, so next up here, anything else on this region before we move on to the last one?
Let's move on.
All right, so last region here, the West region, which is the home of Arizona, the number one overall seed there, number two role. They passed Michigan after they won the Big 12 tournament yesterday. Michigan could not close the deal in the Big 10 tournament. They play local product, the LIU Sharks, fins up as they probably get smacked by 35 in this game. Villanova, Utah State's the 8-9 game, the other Big East representative here. Wisconsin, High Point, very fun 5-12 game. That game's probably like 95-92 if you look, if you bet the over on that game. Arkansas and Hawaii out of the Big West, very out here. BYU, which I think might have been a little overseeded based on what they did.
Yep.
Texas, NC State. That's if you're looking for a team to get out of the first four and get through, that might be one to watch. Gonzaga, Kennesaw State. Here's the Miami, Missouri situation where Miami is the 7 seed. They play a road game against Missouri, basically it's in the 10 seed line, which I don't get. Purdue, 2 seed against Queens. I will say my first takeaway from this region here is boy, you said earlier that the selection committee does not care about the conference tournaments. I give you the case here, Purdue, where Purdue was miserable
That's
for
fair.
a month. They had
Yeah.
a good week in Chicago, and now they're a 2 seed.
No, that's very fair. I mean, I thought as of last week after they lost at home to Wisconsin, Purdue could have been a 4 seed at that point. Yeah, and all the way up to a 2 after, like you said, a good week in the Big Ten tournament. But again, like I see with Arizona, or like I saw with Michigan, I see this path for Arizona not being really too difficult. Like we said, that Purdue as a 2 seed, I don't see them giving even they might not even get there, but I don't see them giving Arizona a ton of trouble. Gonzaga, I thought is kind of I'm not in love with Gonzaga this season. You mentioned BYU, definitely overseeded as a 6 seed. They've struggled without Richie Saunders. I think Arizona's toughest game actually, and they might not even get there. But if Wisconsin can get to that second or to the second weekend and face Arizona, Wisconsin, they've beaten some high level teams. They won at Purdue, they won at Michigan. So like we've seen when those shots are falling for Wisconsin, they can beat anyone. That'll be a really really interesting game. But much like Michigan, I see Arizona getting through this region.
Yeah, I'll add another Wisconsin here, which is you mentioned they won at Michigan. They won at, I think, Purdue. They won at Illinois. They
Mm,
beat Michigan State home. They hit at least 15 threes in all those games, which is
mm,
ridiculous volume here. They've also lost to Oregon. They've had some very
yeah.
strange losses in there. Like,
Hmm.
this is the team that I can guarantee you, matter what you do with them in your bracket, it's going to be wrong.
100%. I was just going to say that they could, if you have them, knocking off Arizona, making runs to the Elite Eight, making a run to the Final Four, they'll get picked off by High Point in round one. You pull the 12-5 upset, High Point over Wisconsin. Wisconsin's making a run. It's like clockwork no matter what. But that's the fun of this bracket, right? Is like a team like Wisconsin. They were just a perfect March Madness team because who knows, they could go to the Final Four or they could lose in the first round. They probably have the highest floor on the and the lowest ceiling of almost any team that's seated on the top 5 or 6 lines, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, you made the point here. Like, I could see a path where Wisconsin wins the national championship if they just play up to the
Yeah.
level. I could see a
Hmm.
path where they lose by 20 by 15 to High Point because they're not hitting
Yeah.
threes. Like,
Yeah. They're
there's no way. Like, the other thing is like the floor is basically through the basement with Wisconsin.
yeah, and this feeling is the national title. So yeah, they're a fascinating team.
Yeah, like that's an appointment television game. Like, once you find that Wisconsin High Point game, because High Point, like, remember Jack Gelke a few years ago who like murdered Kentucky in this
Yep.
like High Point has their own version of him. I think his name is like Corey Johnston, who
Mm.
basically he's taken, I think, 136 field goals on the year, 132 have been from three. And he's taking a 48.5% clip.
I love that. And I believe High Point has do they have the longest winning streak in the country right now?
They might.
Yeah, I think they've won like 14 in a row, 13 in a row. So they've won a bunch of games in a row too. So they're rolling as well.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where I tell people all the time, like, when you're looking at these things, you don't win 28, 29 games in college basketball by accident. So like
Exactly.
when you're playing a 12 or a 13 that has that many wins, like, you're nervous.
100%. Yep.
Anything else you want to go for here this region before we move on?
No, I think we can move on.
All right. Let's take a quick peek here, see if the TV times have come out yet, because that's sort of the last thing we kind of check on here, because like, we've been kind of lucky over the years that we've had it come out like while we're doing this. So I will check in terms of I don't know if it's out yet, but like,
Yeah, I haven't
like
seen.
this. Okay, so I do have some progress here, so I gotta refresh the page. So we go on here because I see times, but I don't know if they're accurate. So while I filibuster here, you want, like, have any general thoughts on, like if you were to buy tickets to a pie, where do you want to go?
Ooh, I mean, I'm a St. John's guy, so I'll go with that one.
You're hopping
Um,
you hop on the plane to San Diego?
exactly. Yeah, you're going to beautiful San Diego as well. You could get an awesome second round matchup, Patino versus Bill Self. So yeah, I'll go to San Diego. I think UConn is out there as well. So you got some big brands out there. So yeah, I would take the cross country flight, and I would enjoy beautiful San Diego. I'd get away from the cold here in New York.
All right. I do have them. Matt and Orlando from CVS does have some tip times for Thursday, Friday. So let's start looking. You want to take a guess here? What is the opening game of the tournament?
Hmm.
Like, what would you want to start the tournament with if it's up to you?
I would say it's probably an 8-9 game.
They've done that the last few years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'll say let me look at the 8-9s. I'll say TCU Ohio State.
On the money. Yeah. TCU Ohio State kicking it
Feeling.
off. The Iron Eagle
Yeah.
pot is in Greenville for the Duke group. The second game of that window, Troy and Nebraska, South Florida, Louisville, High Point, Wisconsin. You're flying high on Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, look at that. Those could be four games all coming down to the wire. I think we talked up all four of those games, so that's an awesome start to the tournament.
Yep. The second window on Thursday, Siena Duke, McNeese and Vanderbilt, North Dakota State, Michigan State, Hawaii, Arkansas. So I'm satisfied with this. Is a good Thursday start.
For sure, for sure. And Duke not in the nighttime region or in the nighttime start. A little surprising there, but yeah, yeah,
It's a 116 game. I can understand why it's not.
for
And
sure, for sure.
and Siena, I feel like is a spot where that game's going to be like decided by like 35 points.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let me just make sure I have the next one pulled up here in terms of the. Okay, so go here to Thursday evenings, our next one here. So we'll go to the 6:50 game is VCU North Carolina. CBS game 7:10 is Michigan and the first four winner. Texas NC State winner against BYU. Texas A&M St. Mary's. So this is pretty solid.
Yeah, good. I mean, outside of the Michigan game, should be three really close games. We both talked about that. St. Mary's Texas A&M game that could be interesting. BYU, you get AJ DeBonsa. North Carolina VCU in Greenville should be awesome. So definitely a good Thursday night slate.
Yeah, late night Thursday, Penn, Illinois, St. Louis, Georgia, Kennesaw State, Gonzaga, Idaho, Houston. So I think this is decent. You have some blowout potential in here, though. So you got 2 2s and 2 3s.
Yeah, I like them giving us a chance to possibly get to bed early on Thursday. With Gonzaga should roll Tennessee State and or Kennesaw State and Houston over Idaho should dominate. So yeah, hopefully we're in bed by like midnight or so on Thursday.
Yeah. Okay, well, now go to Friday. I don't know why it's Friday evening first. Friday afternoon, Santa Clara, Kentucky starts the day. Akron, Texas Tech, LIU, Arizona, Wright State, Virginia here. Again, a banger to start the day on CBS.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, awesome game there, and then you get Akron, Texas Tech, starting as well in Tampa. So definitely, the early portion of that slate is really really good.
Yeah, the underrated window, I think, here is Thursday, the second Thursday window in the afternoon. Tennessee State, Iowa State, not great, but then you have Hofstra, Alabama, Utah State, Nova, potentially Miami, Ohio against Tennessee. That first four winners. That's fun.
For sure. Yeah. And a lot of eyes are going to be on that Miami, Ohio game, in Philly, checking out to see if they can, well, if they make it, first of all, that's a really, really interesting match spot for them.
Yep. And the last one here, I'm checking here because we have not seen your guys yet, so we'll check that out. So we have here Iowa State, Iowa Clemson is the 8-9 game. You got St. John's the big CBS game on Friday night against Northern Iowa. Then UCF, UCLA, and Queens, North Carolina against Purdue. So those are our that's the first group here. So solid thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, how about my Johnny's getting the primetime CBS matchup against Northern Iowa? Yeah, I actually had thought that we were earlier in the day, so they must have changed that. But yeah, definitely an interesting spot for the Johnnies, and then you get some decent games elsewhere in there with Iowa, Clemson, and UCF, UCLA.
Yeah, and then the night session Friday, not the greatest. You got a 116 game, a 215 game. Kansas, Cal Baptist, who knows what version of Kansas you get there. Missouri, Miami is the last game in the round 7-10. So I think like this is another one like where like you might be able to get to bed a little early if you're like not like heavily invested in that window.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. Unless you're a Missouri or a Miami, Florida fan, it might not be a late night for you again.
Yeah, I like for me, my favorite team, Michigan State. Like I've had that window. But that's not the fun window to be when you're at the last game of the first round going.
Yeah, you're watching like every other team play before you actually get a chance to play. Not fun.
Yeah, like I liked it better. Like there was a year, I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I think where Michigan State opened the tournament. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah, just get it out of the way right away.
Yeah. All right, so I think that's a good spot here to stop this, Troy. Thanks for coming on here. Really appreciate it. People want to follow you on social media. How can I do that?
Yeah, of course. You can check me out on Twitter. It's at Troy Mauriello, Mauriello. I'll be tweeting about the Johnnies. So if you're a St. John's fan, definitely check it out.
Yeah, we'll be back next week here. We'll see if Troy is angry about losing Northern Iowa or if he's getting ready for a Sweet 16 trip.
Yeah, you'll get the full range of emotions next week.